Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Rich Clark, Guide to the Right Path. The topic I'm going to talk about is why do people need therapy? Is it because of anxiety, depression, trauma, over-reliance of technology, or loneliness? Now, that seems a long, long title, but I'm going to explain why I'm using this and explain it very clearly. So, as of this week, I kept noticing I was doing topics and it wasn't really hitting where I thought it was. And I always go back to my yogic practice and my learning of that. And I keep always going back to be simple, go back to basics. So the thing I'm going to go back to basics is what do I actually do and what is my work? So as I said, some of these things, why do people need therapy? So the number one, what comes up always is anxiety. Secondly, it's depression, then it's trauma, and then it's relationship issues. And I said about the issue of technology because technology seems to be something people are worried about with AI, the use of it, how it's caused our social standing difference because we are so used to social media, messaging, and so forth. And the one thing that comes up a lot is loneliness. Loneliness seems to come up a hell of a lot for people. And I actually want to explain how anxiety, depression, trauma, and relationship issues is all interlinked. So with anxiety, it's about the idea of why we are feeling anxious. Why do we feel we are not good enough? Why do we feel we can't do things? What keeps us in a rut of what we do? And because we get into that anxious condition, then we go into the next one, which is depression is the feeling of that, is a feeling of hopelessness, loss, not being able to get out of the pit of sorrow. And then the trauma, which is causing them to have the anxiety and the depression, is the aftermath of trauma, which then causes them too. And because anxiety and depression is also very interlinked with trauma, then the relationships issues become very apparent. Because if you have not dealt with your trauma, you may be going into a relationship to heal your trauma, though it can also cause you more anxiety because it's not the right relationship, because you're not going in it to correct, and causing the depression. And maybe you're going into a relationship because you don't want the loneliness. So as you can see, it's very circular. And this is what therapy is about. How do we break them cycles? So the first thing is you will actually, when you see a client, they will say, I'm really lonely, or I've got really bad anxiety. I'm worried about my work. I'm worried about my life. I'm worried about my family. I'm worried about whatever that is. Or I feel depressed. I don't really like meeting people. I'm not social enough. Or they'll say my relationship isn't going very well, marriage isn't going very well, can't even get into a relationship, and so forth. So as a therapist, we do this one or two things. We're always there to find out the why they are in their position they are, where they want to end up, and we are in between the A and the Z of where they want to be. Now, sometimes they may only just want to go A to K, but it's very important that we can work with that. So when I was a therapist, and I'm a hypnotherapist, CBT therapist, and a psychotherapist, so I can kind of work between the three mediums, and it all interlinks, like the conditions of issues. So with that, one of the things I always want to do is find out when the first time that person felt depressed, anxious, what their trauma was, which has led them to then the failed relationships, the leading depression of whether they got older, or their anxiety if they got older. Now, we would say from the Freud knowledge of psychotherapy that 90% of people's issues are from childhood. If you're Jung, you would believe in the Jungian effort is that it could be up to the age of 16 or could be even something in adulthood what's affected you now. And there's never always a clear answer. And you cannot judge people straight away. You can have rough ideas, but you have to do, you are an investigator, you are a detective. And so what you will do is when you put someone into a session, is you will find out through the discovery call what they do. The free discovery call is very important because it's half an hour of finding out what the issues of people have they got. You're writing notes, you're picking up their body language and you ask them certain questions and different things. What's their, so for example, if the person's always talking about how great their mum is or their brother is, but they don't mention their father, then it's like, oh, there's an issue with the father because they're avoiding it. That's an example of things you can look for. So again, you're always picking, you're always looking, and you're always addressing what you can do. So if we did a step-by-step how we'd work on a client, we'd work with what's the client's issues. So let's say the client has an issue of they do not like to leave the house, they have got agoraphobia. What is the reason for that? So they say that the agoraphobia has only been happening in the last 3 years. I would guarantee that it's been something that's affected them before and it's now re-emerged in adulthood, but it's come from childhood. That would be a roughly 80, 90% right. Sometimes I'm wrong, but that's kind of on average through experience. So what you would do is you'd put the person into hypnosis or into a state of that they can talk. You can talk it on psychotherapy, but if you want to, I feel is you need to go into the subconscious and find out what is the issue, what's causing them these triggers and so forth. And so once you do that, you do the following things. You would put them, you guide them closely, guide them carefully into a hypnosis state, into the subconscious state. You'll put them in a safe space. That safe space is a place that if anything crops up in the session that they can go back to and they feel safe and they can pull out. And when I mean pull out, is that they can pull out of the session and they can go back to normal and then go to the toilet. They can then, if they need to cry, whatever, because if they don't feel safe, you have to have that safety net. And with that, you would also have another thing which is called an anchoring. Now, people have different ways of anchoring. They do it with kinesiology and so forth. What I do is I would give them a talisman. So, for example, my talisman could be this with a number on it. And they would then, when they feel unsafe, they'd clamp that and go back to it. So what we would then do is we would then get them to that safe space originally, and then we would then put them into that timeline of when they can tell you when the first time they've ever felt agoraphobic, whether they felt anxious, whether they felt depressed, first time they bite their nails, first time they felt intimidated, the first time they felt the need of peer pressure, whatever the issue is. And usually when it's fears and phobias, it's always something what has made them triggered, or it's anchored them in their brain of what they need to do. So we go back, and the timeline thing is when you go back to people's timeline therapy, which is what they call it, is that person goes back to that time and they go back to being that person as a child. Now, the difference is, as a child, you generally are in the condition and you're looked after by your parents. Now, as an adult, you have a lot more of your independence. So once they go back to that issue, they can then see what that issue is and how now as an adult, they would understand how to deal with it. What can they do? So if they felt unsafe or they felt that they weren't being listened to, they can now change that and talk to the people, which they couldn't do then, about them to be listening to them. And it's part of that healing, part of getting rid of that energy, getting rid of that trigger, getting rid of how that trigger has affected their mind. And now, like you do with a computer or wherever you reprogram something, you change it. So what does that therapist do? Well, the therapist actually gives the person self-empowerment. It gives them the empowerment to actually become the person they want to be, not the person they are. And so when people say life coaching or psychotherapy works, it works only on a conscious level. So 95% of the conscious is dictated by 5% of the subconscious. And the only way you can deal with the subconscious is with hypnotherapy and CBT. You cannot do that with life coaching, and you cannot do it with psychotherapy, because the trouble is the brain, no matter how you think how powerful it is, it cannot get over that hurdle. Going into the subconscious does. It's like the reset button for people. And it's so important as a therapist that not only people would say my reward, what is my reward of helping someone? And people think it's financial. It's not. Personally, if I can change someone's life and make them better, you wouldn't be charging them the money you charge, let's say £150 for an hour and a half or an hour, whatever, or £50 for an hour, whatever it is. That is not rewarding. What the reward is actually seeing that person change from where they are to the person they can be. It's like seeing the potential in people. And so as a therapist, How do we help people? Well, quite simple. How do we help them? Why do people need therapy? They need therapy because they clearly don't have the skills to really change their life. So as a therapist, we have that. We have the skills to change that person's life forever. We have that skills, and this is what we're trained in through our experience, through our knowledge, and through just being able to listen to people and absorb it, understand it, and reframe it for the person. Tell them the right things. Imagine for you if all your life you've been afraid of snakes, or you've been afraid of flying, or you've been afraid of change, being afraid of being alone, and you have 1, 2 sessions, and now you can go flying. You can fly. You can go fly to any country you want in the world. You can go and experience the world. You're not fear of being alone, that you have the independence to understand who you are and really admire that. And then you make the right choice of meeting the right person. You absolve that trauma. You can now do things which you just couldn't do before, no matter how much you were pushed or tried. That's actually invaluable. So what makes a therapist and therapy great? It changes the way your world works. There are certain things you cannot change in the world. You cannot change politics. You cannot change what the people do. You cannot change how people vote. You cannot change how people's opinions are. But what you can do is you can change yourself. And the only way you can do that, and in my opinion, I think more people need therapy. And I think if more people had therapy, we wouldn't have the chaotic world we have. We would have more people balanced. And so one of my missions actually as a therapist is to help not only my generation and the generation below and above, is that the next generation, what comes along, is that they won't need people like me because they actually don't have the trauma. They don't have these issues. And if they do, you resolve it as quickly as possible. What world would nobody want of that? And changing one person's life can then change, and it's a ripple effect. So when people say, why do people go to therapists? Why does therapy work? It's because it actually has a long-lasting effect, and it's like a domino effect. So that is why I'm a therapist. I have been that person who's had a fear of horses. I had a fear of loneliness. I've had issues of feelings of inadequacy. I've had feelings of where I wasn't listened to. I had things where I was told about the idea of money and how it wasn't right to earn too much money. These are all conditionings I had, and I had to get over it. And the only way that happened was by therapy. And no matter how clever I was, how intelligent I was, no matter how many books I read, I still needed that therapy sessions to help me. And through being a therapist, I've then done them sessions and done that work and helped myself. And so, in fact, that's why I want to help people. And being of service to help people is a mighty responsibility people don't understand. And it's painful. It's some things you hear about people, you just feel that why would people live with that so long? Why would they live with them problems so long? But people do, because they don't feel there's an option. But there is always a solution. So if you have any problem in therapy, no matter how small, how minute you may think it is, please go to my website at www.richclark.net, and you can have a free discovery call for 30 minutes, and we can talk about your issues, work out what they are, and then we work out the program to solve your problems and resolve them, and then make you the better person you can be. So why am I called Rich Clark, A Guide to the Right Path? It's because so many of you fall off the path. So many of you go to the full fail on the fail side. You fall off. You fall off where your desire was, your patterns, what your ambitions were. That's my role. And soon I'm going to be talking about this more, about some of the work I've done with people. how it's changed people, how they've started their own businesses, how they've ended up in great relationships, now married, some with children, some people who've actually gone from having horrible abusive backgrounds to now being safe, feeling that they can achieve anything. They feel they can be in new relationships. They can feel they have forgiveness for the person who has hurt them. It's very important, my role, and I don't take it for granted. And it is hard work, I assure you. It's not as easy as it sounds, but that is my role. So, like I said, if anyone's interested, please contact me. I'm also willing to talk about these subjects, talk about how I help people, and there is many roles and many parts of my missions to help people. So until next time, I shall speak to you soon.